we have the caucuses coming up and the primaries, and we've released this training series called BeTheRevolution.us because, in my opinion, I think we need to get better faster at organizing, at our inside-outside strategies, and creating systemic change. So we're going to be announcing the release of my book, The Political Revolutionary's Handbook, tomorrow. So I'm actually testing this out. But to test it out, I wanted to offer something valuable, which to me was one of the most valuable trainings I've received. This has been around for a while. It's used in transformational trainings. It's used in sales trainings. But I have found is one of the most effective ways to be able to know exactly how to communicate with somebody effectively. A lot of times we end up communicating only in our personality style, and that means that our communication may not be as effective because we're communicating the way we like to be communicated with, or those style that's most natural for us. But as you know, there are lots of different types of personality styles. This one training deals with 4 primary ones. Generally, everyone's going to be a mixture of 2 that are dominant. There'll be a primary, a secondary one. Maybe you have a little bit of the third. So let's get into it. The reason that I think this is super effective is if you are not communicating if you're not able to identify the personality archetype or style of the person you're talking to, and you're using a different one, it actually can really rub them the wrong way. There's no value judgment on any of these. It's just these are sort of how we're most naturally organized. So this particular system identifies 4. I know there's all sorts of other different ways that people have identified personalities, and you may have one that you like. I don't know, what is it? There's one that's called Briggs-Meyer. You're like the INTJ or ENTP or ENFP, whatever. But this one, what I like about this is you can really, there are physical traits that you can help to identify someone immediately. Now I'm going to start the first with what you might call the controller. This is the one that I identify most with. Forgive my terrible handwriting. All right, so this is the controlling style. Now, the controlling style are your classic, type, you might say the type A personalities. Obviously, control can be a factor. They might come off a little dominating. They might come off a little gruff. But there's a lot people actually don't know about controlling style, people who are sort of following the controlling style. One, how do you identify them? Now, generally speaking, this is not going to be always true, but generally speaking, they're going to edge more towards being clean cut. Clean cut and presentable. Generally speaking, they're going to be a little crisper in their presentation. Their hair is usually going to be a little more, it's going to be tighter. In general, they'll be a little more put together. They'll present well. So generally, if you see them, they'll be clean cut. And you'll know them because they generally they're a little bit more intense. You'll see this style attracts, people who like to be out in front, people who like to lead. I mean, it's very rare you're going to find a CEO who is not a controller. So a lot of times they gravitate towards being bosses, that kind of thing. And if you are a controller, your controlling style can really, now one thing that we controlling style people do are great at, one of the virtues of it is they're about results. All about results. So, if you have a controller on your team, if you can figure out how to most effectively use them, that your team is actually going to get results. The downside is that controllers tend to rub people the wrong way. They're a little bit rough around the edges, a little bit abrasive, and no one ever wants to be talked to in the controlling style, except controllers. So, but the thing is about controlling style people is if you're talking to a controller, if you can communicate with them in the language that they identify with, you actually can be really effective. One of the things that people don't know a lot about controlling style people, they don't know this generally because controlling style people train everyone around them not to take them on, right? So by being this like intense person, you know, little people maybe walk on eggshells a little bit around them, right? But here's the thing that most people don't know about this style, about this personality style, is that controllers are actually the most likely, if you can get through to them, they're the most likely to change their behavior, right? So if you can actually get through to them and talk to them in a way that they can hear, they're actually the most likely to actually change their behavior. So the way to talk to a controller is to be direct. All right. So of the other styles, I'll just put them up here because I may reference them. So the other styles, you're going to have controller, promoter, right? You're going to have the analytical style. And there's a supporting style, supporter. Okay. So controller, promoter, analytical, and supporter. In other systems, they may call this the formal style, for instance, the analytical. They might call them formal style. Some systems that have basically the same training, they may use colors. So you may know it another way, but the main thing is, what is the effect? So the main way to talk to a controlling style person is to be direct. If you go, now promoters tend to be sort of the life of the party, right? They thrive off of enthusiasm. And so if you're talking to a promoter, it's really important to have energy, enthusiasm, like, hey, you got to check this thing out. They really feed off of that type of energy. But a promoter talking to a controller, honestly, it's going to drive us nuts. If you come up to me, for instance, you want to tell me about Bernie Sanders, for instance, just for example, say, hey, I want to talk to you about this candidate. He's so awesome. He's been, he's been consistent for 40 years, and he's really made a challenge against the establishment, and we think he's the best to take on Donald Trump. Now, this might be the style that works for you, that you resonate with. But if you say talk this way to a controller, it's going to drive them nuts. It's going to drive them nuts. So the best way to talk to a controller is to be direct. Say, like, hey, listen, like, I'd like to talk to you about this candidate. We think that he has the best shot against Donald Trump, and I'd like 30 seconds of your time to tell you why. Now, one of the things that's also difficult about controllers is, one of the ways that you need to get through to them is, unfortunately, you have to have some kind of credibility, right? So if you don't have if you're not able to establish some kind of credibility, you might establish credibility just with your presence. Now, controllers are used to backing people down, right? They're used to kind of challenging people. So number one, you can't be wimpy with them. You can't be passive or dismissive of yourself. Otherwise, they'll tend to unconsciously, not consciously, they'll tend to steamroll people. So credibility, having credibility. If you have not been your word and not delivered on the things, for instance, if you know a controller and you have not delivered on your word to them, you'll have zero credibility with them. Zero, right? If you do have credibility with them, they will listen to you. And you also still get to communicate in a way that is direct and powerful to be with them. So credibility is super important. And if you don't have credibility, you might find a way to navigate that immediately. You might say, like, listen, I know you don't know me. I know you don't have any reason to listen to me or trust me. I just need 30 seconds of your time. Okay. And my request is that you listen with an open mind. Okay. And they may say yes, they may say no. Okay, I'll give this guy 30 seconds. They'll be more inclined to listen to you if you can show up in a way that's direct and powerful, and you look them right in the eyes and say, listen, this is really important, and I just like 30 seconds of your time. If you want to go on past that, that's fine, but I request that you give me your undivided attention, listen with an open mind, okay? So direct, establish credibility, be powerful, okay? Right? Definitely be powerful, okay? They will respond to power, right? They will be able to feel power, right? So if you kind of feel them energetically posturing or something, you don't have to flex and get a pissing contest with them, but you can definitely call on them, like, say, listen, I'm not attempting an opening here to be able to have an adult conversation. I'm not really detecting, I'd like to be able to talk about this with you, but I don't sense I'm not sensing that you're open to listening to me. You can call them on it, but you got to do it direct. You can sometimes you can just say, I call bullshit on that. But the main thing is, like, it's kind of like when you meet a bear on the trail, like they say, like to get real big like that. It's kind of that type of thing. But yeah, direct, establish credibility, be powerful is really important. Be really important. The thing that people don't know, again, like I'm going to repeat this again, if you have a controller in your life, one of the reasons that controllers love results is they also love results for other people, right? So people may consider controllers to be selfish or self-involved and just out for themselves. And a lot of times that's true, but they also want results for other people as well. So, and the other thing is they will also tend to, they will be the most likely to actually change the behavior if you can get through to them. If they can, because here's one thing about controllers is they will tend to have trails of bodies in terms of the relationships that they probably stepped on people's toes. They've probably been dominating, that kind of thing. So they, inherently they kind of know this. If you can also help them to understand the costs other people are paying, for instance, if they push back on taxes or whatever, you might push back and say, look, I understand that you're doing well, but not everybody's doing well. And I don't know if you realize this, but 30,000 people die every year because they don't have health insurance. And we really think that this is a big problem in our society. But again, like, you want to also talk about results. So for instance, if you're canvassing, for instance, for Bernie Sanders, they might say, well, what has he ever done? You might want to have a track record of the things he's accomplished, right? For instance, you might bring up the fact that Bernie Sanders is the amendment king. He's actually passed more amendments, gotten more legislation done by amendment than any sitting congressman or senator. I think it's something like 400 and something by amendment. So he was able to, even in bad legislation, he was able to get a lot done in that time, right? And certainly you can't argue with, the way that he has already changed the conversation in this country. And you might also go to some of the numbers. For instance, you might say, look, the reality is Bernie is the strongest to face Trump because he has 1 million volunteers. He has raised more money than any congressman or any senator, any candidate, and he has the highest net favorables. That means that he is the strongest. Look at his crowd size. You can't argue with this. So go to some of the strengths. Promoting style, you'll know them because they're going to be generally a little more disheveled. I actually have controlling and promoting style are very present with me. Hence I'm not quite as, well kempt, so to speak. You see my hair is a little disheveled, longer hair. Promoting style, you'll notice they're not very, they're not as crisp, right? They're not as crisp. They'll be dressed a little bit, much more casually. Hair might, buttons may not be all the way buttoned. They present a little looser. So the thing about promoters is that they're all about energy. So definitely the easiest to get on board. If you're organizing a meeting, organizing, any kind of organizing event, promoters are great because they're also super fun. Promoters are all about fun. They're all about energy. So if you want to get on board, you gotta be really passionate. So if you're, for instance, more of an analytical style and you're approaching a promoter, and you're like, "Hi, I'd like to talk to you about this thing that I'd like to talk to you about." Like if you're kind of robotic, you're gonna see their eyes are gonna glaze over, and you're not gonna get a lot of traction from them. So the promoting style is all about energy. It's all about it's definitely all about energy. So you want to say like, "Hey, I really want to take a couple minutes just to talk to you about this thing. It's really exciting." Right. So whether you're organizing for your, an action, an event, or you're canvassing, being passionate and enthusiastic is really going to help. And you're going to notice because they also have sort of they'll be a little more unkempt, a little more disheveled, but they'll also kind of have that vibe. They'll feed off of it right away. Now, the thing about promoters is that the thing that is most important to a promoter is feeling honored. Feeling honored. Feeling honored is important. A lot of times promoters feel this way because one of the things that promoters, unlike controllers, are not good at is results over time. Tend to be great starters. They'll start off strong, and then over time they will, not follow through. For instance, they might not follow through on something for a long enough time. They'll get enthusiastic, and then they won't generally have the consistency. A lot of times they'll be late. A lot of times, so their relationship with their word is not great. Controllers are very in relationship with their word, and they expect others to be in relationship with their word. So if you blow a call, or you miss a call, or you're late, your credibility with a controller is going to go way down. So these two tend to not, if you have a really dominant type of one of these, I have a little bit of both of them, so I get them. But for me, actually, the controller style listening, my listening style is definitely controller. When a promoter talks to me, sometimes, I can shift into it, but a lot of times it's sort of like, can we get to the point? I really, really need to get to the point. Because they're so focused on results, their time is really valuable, right? So make sure you honor their time. And if you get a sense that they're like looking at their watch, just so really get in fast and make sure you get out before, because for them, time is really valuable. With promoters, they'll go on for a while. Now, you want to make sure that a promoter feels honored. That's really important. That's going to be a pain point because a lot of the times they have probably let themselves down and let others down a bunch of times. They probably, haven't kept up with the things that they want to do. You'll notice this type of they have big ideas. They're big idea people, very enthusiastic, right? Right. And that enthusiasm isn't always going to land well with everybody, right? Because there's something about it where you might just not feel that they're credible. Like there's a sense of themselves where it might not feel credible to you or to them. So if you are a promoter, be mindful of that. Be mindful that can come off. You can come off sometimes as not credible, not grounded, not credible, because it's all very much. Now, if a promoter's talking to a promoter, all good. They'll get it all day. Now, the other thing with promoters, because of that follow through, So if you're organizing something, really make sure that this person has a track record. These are not going to be your best follow-through people. In terms of getting people excited about something, these are the ones you want in terms of getting people excited, right? They're usually going to social butterflies. Are going to know a lot of people. Great for spreading the word. But if you have something that's really important, you know, you want to make sure that at least there's an organizing structure where they're set up to be reminded, and you got to check back with them, because it's very easy that, like, social butterflies can also tend to flutter away, you know. So as soon as there's another party, a better party, they might go to the better party, right? So if there's something else that, you know, starts to appeal to them, it's very easy for their attention to then go on to the next thing. So follow through is definitely can be an issue with the promoting style person. But if you're just meeting them, definitely being enthusiastic, you know, getting it to land a sense that you think that they're important, that they feel honored, that you think they're important, being enthusiastic, and, you know, making sure that there is a way that, you know, if it's about voting, make sure that, you know, you leave them something to let them know, you know, when to vote. Another cool thing you can do too, if you're canvassing, is getting them to take a picture and post it to their social media is a great way that you can have them start accessing their network, that kind of thing. Actually, that goes for everybody. But specifically, promoting style is definitely going to be about that. But, you know, really, like, talk about the excitement, why things are so exciting. Like, we're bringing a, you know, this is a political whatever language is best for you, but really talk about this being the exciting thing, right? You know, you might find they might respond well to something like if there's a rally coming up with AOC or with Bon Iver or with Jack White or something, you know, you get them excited about that kind of thing. The other thing too is they're very resourceful, really, really resourceful. So if you need to get something done in the clutch, promoters are fantastic about getting stuff done in the clutch, right? So if you have something last minute that's coming through, or rapid response, promoters really, really great at that. All right. So here you have the next style you want to talk about is the analytical. So analytical people, also clean cut, very clean cut, right? Classic, you know, engineer, accountant, you know, computer programmer. You know, you'll see like the very classic, the very sort of very clean cut, very straight laced, very crisp. They'll tend to be dressed in a way that's very crisp. Their hair will be, you know, tightly cropped, or, you know, the main thing about the analytical style is that they are analytical, not rocket science, right? So the challenge for analytical people, they're also fantastic at results, really great at getting results and being consistent. Consistency. So in an organization, if you can have some analytical people, they will do what they say they're going to do. They will always do what they say they're going to do, right? So promoters can tend to struggle with controllers and analyticals for various reasons. Also, the promoters at times analytical people can respond to the energy of a promoter, right? They can, because a lot of times they do crave that. They don't feel, because their life is so ordered, they feel, you know, maybe a sense of not feeling as free as they'd like to, right? Promoter doesn't even have to know if, you know, if there's water in the pool to jump. Like, they're going to jump. Like, analytical people have a hard time. Like, if an analytical person says to you, like, "Hey, I need to think about it," they're being honest with you. So if an analytical person says, "Hey, I need to think about it," they do, right? If a promoter says, "I need to think about it," they're bullshitting you, right? If a controller says they need to think about it, they're bullshitting you, right? You haven't established credibility. You haven't connected with them. They don't trust you, you know. So you got to check. You can ask them reasonable questions like, "Well, you know, I don't get that." But if an analytical person says they need to think about it, they're being honest, right? So you need to give them a wider lane on that. In terms of if you're canvassing, right? Like if you're going to be canvassing and talking to an analytical person, you can identify this person as analytical. Sometimes they can respond to the energy of a promoter, but also be careful because they can also get overwhelmed. Because if there's too much information, they need information, but at the same time, you got to be careful not to overwhelm them, because you'll see them, like the color wheel on the Mac, you have that spinning wheel. It's just like you'll see their brain, they'll kind of go into overload a little bit. And having a lot of information definitely helps. Right, having information helps. So if you have a pamphlet or something that has numbers on it, they love to get information. Right now, one of the challenges with the analytical type is that they constantly need more and more information because they don't want to make a wrong decision. But the problem is there's almost never enough information, right? So it's important to sort of try to invite them to get closer to making a decision without overwhelming them. So and sometimes it's really just about maintaining connection and building up follow through with an analytical type. But if you have an analytical type in your organization, they will make sure everything is running right. Now, the other part of that, of having analytical people in your organization, is from a leadership perspective, you really got to make sure that there are systems in place for it to run right, or empower them to create systems, right? Because if you don't, you'll lose them. Like chaos does not go well with analytical people. They do not like chaos. They'll notice they're very ordered. They have a system for everything, and they, but very loyal. This is they're great people to have in your crew, in your organization, if you really want things to continue in a sustainable way. And lastly, we have the supporter, right? So also the supporters are they're definitely going to be disheveled, right? So they're going to look a little bit more disheveled, like the promoter. You're going to notice they're not going to your clothes are not going to be generally ironed, and hair isn't going to be as crisp. The thing about supporters is they live to serve. They live for others. And you're going to find them all over the nonprofit world, all over the volunteer world. I would say probably the overwhelming, by demographic, you're going to have I think a lot of supporting style people will be attracted to progressive causes of Bernie Sanders because they care about people. They want to make sure it's fair for everyone, right? They want to show up for people. They're going to volunteer a lot. They really do care. They live for other people, right? So if you're talking to somebody who is a supporter, if you're talking to a controller, they're going to be, what's in it for me? This style is going to be like, really like, what's in it for me, right? How is this going to benefit me in my own life, whatever it is? Supporting style, all about other people. They live for other people, right? So if you keep coming back to, with this one, with Bernie, you might say, the thing is, like, if when we have Medicare for all, we're all going to pay less, and we may pay a little more in taxes, but there's no more premiums, there's no more deductibles. And can you imagine all the small businesses that will be able to, that aren't going to have to worry about providing healthcare for their providing healthcare for their employees, right? And that the businesses are not going to have to pay healthcare costs, which is enormous benefit. Can you imagine what kind of innovation we might have when kids aren't saddled with student debt, right? Kids get out of college and they're $100,000, $200,000 in debt, and so they're not as likely to start a business or innovate, right? They're just going to get a job somewhere and stay at that job, which is not going to bring in innovation into our economy, something like that. With a supporter, they're really about other people. So you got to make sure that the way that you're talking to them is connecting with other people, right? If you're controlling style, really be careful when you're talking to supporters. Also analytical, because most likely they have had people in their life who are controllers walk all over them. And so they're going to be a little bit more sensitive, and they're going to be more attuned to that. Controlling style, like you want to use an AM radio voice, so you really want to try to tone down your voice. This is never going to be a good voice to use if you're a controller, unless you're talking to a controller. But yeah, I recommend using a softer tone, soften your tone, right? Be mindful of your energy, because that's going to be, supporters are going to be really, really attuned to that. The other thing too is with the analytical and the supporter, they're both a little more passive. They're more passive. They've both probably been stepped on a little bit by these two. They've been probably steamrolled. So they're going to be a little more if you break your word to an analytical person, they will never forget it. They will never forget it. They will forgive you, but they'll never, you're going to lose a lot of credibility with support as well. They will forgive you, but the trust is going to be difficult because they've put themselves out so often that a lot of times they're going to feel, they're going to be much more sensitive to that because they put themselves out so often. Probably they've been taken advantage of a lot more, right? So they live for others. The main thing is they want to feel powerful. Right? So number one, what is the cost other people are paying, right? How many people are dying because of healthcare? How many people are dying on the streets because their society, because of income inequality, right? Because the game has been rigged. The sense of fairness is really going to touch that pain point for a supporter. So really driving home the costs other people are going to pay. What are the costs that the next generation are going to be paying, because they don't have a planet to live on? We're not even going to leave them with a planet, right? So, that's a pain point that you can touch. But the main thing is they want to feel powerful. So making if you can have it land that their voice matters, that they matter, that is a way to really connect with them in a powerful way. They're not going to do it for themselves though. So really making sure that you frame things in a way that, ask them if they have kids, ask them if they have nephews or nieces, ask them if they have other people in their life, ask them if there's other people who have been affected, right? By whatever, by whatever cause. So anyways, you can go a lot more in depth into all of this, but I love this. And, know that, it's not just one thing, for instance, my controller, promoter, and supporter are almost equal, and my analytical is almost non-existent, right? Anything that has to do with spreadsheets, it's not my favorite thing to do. I would prefer to do just about anything than do that. So for me, these are all basically even, and I have to actually really work on this. The other thing too is if you have any one of these is more dominant, you actually can, once you understand these, you can actually develop one more. I used to be very, very, very promoter style. That was definitely the most dominant style. But at a certain point, I really wanted results and consistency. So I really focused on this as well. Now, for me, I focus on the analytical stuff. That means I make an extra effort maybe to button that button, You know, I might make an extra effort to get my, not today, unfortunately, but, you know, to get my hair tight, or to, you know, cross that T or dot that I, you know, I might spend a little bit more time, you know, trying to make things even, as you'll see is not reflected in my terrible handwriting. But anyways, I hope that this was helpful to you. And there's a lot more information at betherevolution.us, and would love your help in, if you want to join us tomorrow. I'm going to go over some of the concepts in the book, in particular, a new theory on this political spectrum that I have never seen anywhere. And it's a new theory that I'm introducing to understanding the political spectrum in a new way beyond the traditional left-right. I know the libertarians also have some kind of system that looks like a graph system. It's not that. It's totally different. I don't think anyone's seen it. And it's also useful. If you understand this system, you will understand who to talk to, and who you can talk to and who you can't talk to, and why. It will also explain why there seems to be some kind of Bernie Trump crossover. Even though we are diametrically opposed, they're fundamentally opposed to undocumented immigrants and racial justice, heavily, you know, much more racism. You're going to see a lot more racism on this side. You know, progressives fundamentally, in theory, in our ethos, are anti-racist. Like, fundamentally in our ethos, anti-racist. Doesn't mean that progressives are immune to racism at all, but we're fundamentally that way. But it'll explain why. And it will also explain why the establishment is absolutely off its rocker, thinking that they can push a centrist candidate, and a centrist candidate is going to win. So it's going to explain all that stuff. So anyways, tune in tomorrow. I think we're going to try to go live at noon. And that's it. I hope that this was valuable to you. This for me was life-changing when I got this dialed in. So anyways, thanks for watching, and, you know, tell us if you have any comments or anything. Okay, all the best.